We are honored to have CJ coming in from Compass today to talk about the company and well whatever else you're going to talk about. So I'm just excited to hear it. Floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, appreciate you guys all coming and obviously. First off, I want to thank the Sonoda team. Obviously, built a great relationship with them, given our interaction in the mining ecosystem, just the tools that you guys are building to make it more accessible for miners, obviously also in other groups, but to access power, rack space is obviously pretty key, right? As we kind of, obviously from the Compass perspective, we seek to decentralize access to hash rate and make it accessible for everyone. So maybe I can start there with just, what is Compass, where we founded, how long we've been around. So Compass was founded in the aftermath of the last Bitcoin halving, so back in late 2020. Very, similar environment really to what we have today. Like low hash price, wasn't really that economically interesting to mine Bitcoin, right? But I think one of the things that we've learned over the course of the years is there's a lot of reasons to mine Bitcoin that aren't pure fiat profit, right? Like I think there's a lot of interest in mining and what it does to differentiate, the proof of work, differentiate it from other crypto assets, other digital assets, and what mining is in this relationship to the physical world that some of these other digital assets don't have. So as mentioned, Compass founded late 2020, really with a mission of making it accessible for anybody to mine Bitcoin. So really, if you've tried to mine Bitcoin, you've probably noticed that it's very, typical mining ASIC, right, is really loud. It generates a lot of heat. It's not something you're going to have typically in your house, right, if you want to spare your marriage. So that was kind of like the vision that Compass was founded on, like, hey, this is really inaccessible. As ASICs become more and more prevalent, you have to have purpose-built infrastructure to mine Bitcoin. And so how do we, Bitcoin was founded on this very call it guerrilla style, you were basically mining on your laptop or in your homes, and that has basically been lost over time as these ASICs have become more and more popular because you have to have that purpose-built infrastructure to mine. And so anyway, that basically Compass was founded on this ability. How do we make that rack space accessible to small and light institutions that maybe they don't have the capital to go buy their own infrastructure or set up their own mining facility? And so that's where we basically kind of think of it as maybe a WeWork kind of a situation, right? Where Compass will go to these commercial data centers and say, hey, we can bring to you, call it 5 megawatts or 10 megawatts of customers. You'll never have to interact with the end customer. We recognize, interacting with thousands of customers is hard, and you probably don't want to do it. So we'll handle all of that, and we will bring those customers, and we'll fill your rack space and consume that power, and you get obviously the benefit of the additional power consumption and the markup you can charge on that. And so we found a lot of success, right? Obviously, late 2020 was kind of in the aftermath of all of the COVID stimulus checks and all of that stuff. And so people were starting to think pretty actively again about what is money, right? Like, is it real anymore? Like, can I look for, how do I get access to hard money? So obviously gold, is another example of that. But so anyway, we kind of hit the sweet spot, I guess, of product market fit, but also like this wave of new wave of adoption or of interest in Bitcoin mining. Certainly have had our bumps along the years. I think we've learned a lot. Really the focus at the beginning was aggregating kind of these third-party data centers with retail and light institution customers. I think over time we've realized, hey, the control over the infrastructure is super important, right? One of the unfortunate things I think about our industry is sometimes, in the past certainly, I think it's less so today, but it has attracted a lot of maybe profit seekers, people that don't always have other people's best interests at heart. And so that, for better or for worse, Compass has gotten to stand in the middle of that and kind of vet out, hey, who are the good actors, who are the bad actors, and really helping protect those end retail customers from those bad actors and offering them a good experience. So that's where we're headed today, right? Is basically owning and operating our own facilities. Obviously, Sonoda's a key part of that, and how we get more access to rack space and do that at a cost compelling way offer better and better access to light institutions, retail customers. I think one of the key, I think you've seen this over the course of the last 10 years, but one of the cool developments, I was talking with Rob earlier about it, is some of these more and more cool projects on like, called like BitAx, and some of the, I think Canon has one of like a nano, things like that. Brains put one out maybe 6 months ago. Really cool. It kind of builds into that ethos of what Compass was founded on, of really putting back mining into the hands of just people who want to do it at home, right? So like maybe people that aren't the most economically sensitive, right? They don't care if they mine Bitcoin at 40,000 a Bitcoin, right? Or mine it profitably. What they want to do is they want to accumulate sats. They want to build an ecosystem. And so that's obviously really exciting. Something we're thinking a lot about at Compass is how do we engage in that. So more to come on that, but definitely something we're thinking a lot about and excited about all the trends that are on that side of things as well. The other key focus, as I mentioned, is for Compass is on infrastructure. Really, working with third parties really allowed us to scale quickly. I think I would say at this point we're the largest mining as a services provider, certainly in North America. And one of the things that scale has allowed us to see is just the downsides of working with third parties, right? We just don't have the level of control or accountability to the end client and the ability to deliver a great experience, right? Because if you're mining Bitcoin, especially on kind of the retail level, your focus is on uptime, right? So you don't want to hear about your machine that needs a new hash board, or you don't want to hear about your unit getting relocated because a facility contract is done, or some like counterparty that wasn't reputable and didn't manage their power contract accordingly. So that's really been a focus for us, is standing up our own infrastructure and making sure we can provide that high level of customer support and uptime that they're needing. So that's kind of really the high level overview of Compass. It's been really fun. Ride over the last couple of years, really just focused on delivering for our customers and being excited about what the next few years looks like. Obviously, this year being an election year, it's exciting to see really starting to build that wave of excitement around maybe this next call it class of Bitcoiners that are going to be minted here in the next bull market, right? Like, I think we're just starting to get there, right? In the political environment of like people that have not ever had to hear the word Bitcoin or haven't had to think about it are now having, the leading political candidates like talk about it and talk about policy and stuff. So that's obviously really exciting. That's really all I have. I'm just excited to be part of this group here tonight, and please seek me out if you guys have any questions or want to talk more about mining, home mining, hosted mining, having your own facility, things like that. We're able to help in any way. So happy to help as we can.
Well, you want to take some questions from?
Of course, yeah. Any questions?
Perfect.
Happy to take it.
Well, first question I have is what have you seen in terms of like trend line in terms of number of machines people buy? Is just kind of things like that. Like how is your average customer sort of shifted over time, or has it shifted?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So that's a question we get a lot, right? It is, hey, mining is like all-time low hash price or pretty close to it, right? Does it make sense to mine Bitcoin? Right? Shouldn't I just buy? That's like the classic, sales question that you have to overcome. And in a lot of ways, I think of mining as you have to think similar to a commodity producer like oil and gas or other commodities, where the time to invest in mining is really, you have to do it when profitability is low, right? Because if you're doing it when profitability is really high, everybody else is doing it at the same time, right? So you're most likely to have a negative outcome if you're investing pro-cyclically instead of counter-cyclically. So buy when, it's obvious, right? You buy low and sell high, but really focusing on the gross margins, buying low when gross margins are low, and then selling when gross margins are high, or that's the approach that I bring, or kind of the mentality that I bring to that conversation. Outside of that, so retail interest is definitely pretty muted right now, and that's not surprising, right? I think you've seen some announcements from other Bitcoin companies. Probably the most popular one was Swan News a couple weeks ago, with some layoffs. They just haven't seen the retail adoption that they probably expected post ETFs, and I think, frankly, that's just kind of the nature of the cyclical nature of Bitcoin, right? Is when mining profitability is low when Bitcoin price is kind of just trading sideways. There's not a lot of interest and excitement around mining, right? So right now, definitely retail is lighter as far as their interest in mining. We're starting to see more and more, I would say, concentration or interest from some of these larger institutions that are like taking this counter-cyclical view, where hey, now's the time to invest because we expect the bull market, right? So definitely starting to see that. So I would say for better, for worse, and I would say taking it back to the ethos of decentralization, I would say probably for worse. You're starting to see this more concentration with larger players that maybe either more well capitalized, have access to the public markets or other things where they can just kind of spend indiscriminately, I guess, and wait out maybe these other participants that are not as well capitalized. But I think the counterpoint to that, and I think the thing that's really interesting is, when we get asked this question, like, how's retail doing? Maybe they're not buying a lot of machines right now, but I think they're relatively price insensitive when it comes to mining Bitcoin because they are mining Bitcoin for their ethos-driven miners, right? They're not profitability-driven miners. And that's the thing that's, I think, really we've noticed a lot is on the larger scale. Like when mining turns on, like if they haven't properly risk managed their business or set, healthy level of OPEX, expenses aside to make sure that they can cover their OPEX, then when the tough times come, right, they're only going to be able to maybe last for a couple months until they kind of have to hand over their machines because they just can't pay their bills anymore. Whereas retail, that's not the case, right? Typically, they're funding their monthly power consumption from, from the whatever their monthly budget or whatever. It's really for them. It's about converting fiat into sats, right? How do I stack more sats? And mining is just a way to do that. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Do you offer tools or help with retail miners on economics and how to think about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we definitely have tools on our website. So like if you think of like what is the profitability of a given miner with a hosted solution, things like that. There are a lot of great tools. I think we can do more to build those tools. Like, Brains has great calculators. Others have great calculators around like, hey, is it profitable to mine? Or what does that look like? But definitely like, having those conversations, talking to them like, hey, you have to think about that. Like right now profitability is not high, all right? And so like having those qualifying conversations with those, retail oriented investors that are thinking about that. But ultimately on the retail side, it's not always an economic equation, right? So that's I think another important thing to consider for them.
Aside from the Bitcoin market itself, how would you describe the market for machines? Are there any new cool ASICs coming out?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually one of the pretty interesting, exciting developments from my perspective. So right now, Bitmain tends to, I think I don't know what the exact number is, but they typically have, I think it's like around 90% of the market share for machines. But you're starting to see a lot of new, other companies come out with new machines to kind of challenge that position, right? So Block is a big one. They announced a big deal with Core Scientific a few weeks ago about their new miner that they're developing. They're also doing some interesting things with like offering, like selling their chips and doing like swappable hash boards and things like that, where it's not like the shoebox where your shoebox fails, you just kind of have to like ship it off and get it replaced. Whereas my understanding of Block solution is like you just basically have a chassis that you sit and then you have a spare set of hash boards or whatever, you can put them in and just you don't have to like ship it out, incur a bunch of logistics costs. It's really just swapping. So that's pretty interesting. BitDeer and others, there's a lot of public players that are starting to think about the risks of centralization in the hardware market specifically.
Yeah.
I think the other cool thing I mentioned a little bit ago, that you're starting to see a lot of people think about home mining or solo mining and how they can serve that market, right? More focused on retail. Like how can we provide the tools for people to mine at home where they maybe want to get that tangible like be a part of the network and actually like understand what an ASIC looks like or understand what a home miner looks like. So the really cool open source project is the BitX, which you may or may not have heard much about. I would encourage you to look that up. Canon has a cool one with their Nano and their Brains and others, but so that's really cool on kind of the home mining retail side. But yeah, I think there's been a laundry list of kind of these public players or larger players coming out with their own miners to kind of challenge Bitmain in kind of the market leading position. BitDeer, Canaan still has their series they're doing. Obviously, MicroBT is still there. But really the focus, I think, on hardware is you kind of have these home miners or retail focused miners. You have a little bit of a decentralization with Ordyne and Canaan and BitDeer and all these others. And then you also have the emergence of focus on hydro and immersion, which is becoming more and more kind of that one's an interesting one because my view has always been immersion, because it requires such an extra investment in infrastructure, it hasn't made a lot of sense for most to do immersion, but those economics are starting to get a little bit better. So you might start to see more of that. And then some of these large players are investing a lot in hydro units as well, so it's water cooled. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the hardware. Long-winded way of saying a lot of interesting things going on.
A quick follow-up for like someone who's running a BitX or one of your clients. I'm not super familiar if your clients own the machines or if they're renting hash power. But in either case, if they're only pointing a small amount of hash, how do you guys overcome the the hurdle of doing like an on-chain payment, or do you guys use Lightning? Or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we actually only do. We feel very strongly that the clients should own the machines. There's some regulatory implications there, especially doing business in the U.S. But also kind of there's been a lot of issues with like kind of hash power, like cloud mining in the past, and we've been very intentional to stay away from that. But to answer your question, so our customers have autonomy over their pool choice. We don't tell them they have to use one particular pool. So those questions typically will ultimately decide on the pool that they choose. Different pools have different requirements. You can typically set pretty low thresholds for distribution there. Then it becomes a question of UTXO. If you have your payout thresholds too low and you have a lot of small UTXOs, you could have fee issues down the road. So there are some pools. I know Brains is one. I don't know if there are others that have implemented Lightning integrations yet. But that is something I know a lot of them are looking at.
Thank you.
What were you doing before this, CJ?
It's a good question. So I was entirely out of Bitcoin before Compass. So my journey to Compass actually. So I started. I was Compass's third customer. I actually found Compass through the Coinbase app. Just like they have, basically any news affiliated with whatever coin you're looking at, right? And so I was looking at Bitcoin price, as many people do probably. And so I saw their PR release about the founding of their platform, and I was like, oh, that's literally exactly what I've been looking for. Like, I can't mine at my house. I want somebody to help me mine. How can I do that? And so that's how I found Compass and joined the team shortly after.
Let's go.
So your customers, when you say retail, you're not talking about, I was thinking enterprise retail, but you mean like random people on the street.
Yeah, you and me. Yeah, so literally, like, exactly. So like our minimum MOQ is 1, right? So you can have 1 miner in one of our facilities, and that's it, and we're happy to serve, right? So legitimately 1 miner up to thousands.
All right, fun one for you.
Yeah.
If there was one country you could choose to rival the U.S. in hash rate in 10 years, who would do it?
Of who I think is going to?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Probably China. I think they already probably do. It's a little bit under the surface, shadowy. Russia is probably I would say 1A and 1B, because I think they have a lot of hash rate it's already operating there as well, and a lot of hydro, assets there. Mm-hmm. Gives you an interesting. Those 3 names give you an interesting cross section of what the next 10 years. Yeah, I don't think North Korea is going to be big in space.
Those still,
They don't have enough energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of the core thing, like, which is pretty interesting, is like the countries that view, and this is kind of more shifting more to the energy side of it, like that view mining as a tool to augment their grids, that view that as a way to stand up renewable assets in a cost subsidized way, basically. I think those are the nations that are going to benefit. You don't have a you know what's the word I'm looking for, but basically, like, you don't have a well-developed country that is power poor, right? Like, you have to be very power rich to have a high level of quality of life. And so, like, I think the ones that understand that, I think, are really going to thrive over the next 10, 20 years.
Domestically, which state leads in mining?
Yep, Texas is the big one. They have gigawatts of load. I think the number I heard is like 5. I don't know if that's accurate, but 5 gigawatts of load there. Oklahoma, Georgia are still very big as well. But the Midwest. So Midwest is growing a lot. Obviously, I think largely driven by the desire to diversify away from Texas, right? You have a lot of concentration risk there. So Ohio's growing a lot. Big plug for Ohio. Yeah, obviously near and dear to my heart. I live here, so that's a big one. But yeah, other Midwest states, so Iowa, Minnesota, others, the Dakotas also are big as well.
What's a day in the life for you?
A lot of phone calls. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I like to focus on is the sentiment of our customers, right? So, like, monitoring, like, transactions on the platform, trying to make sure, we do offer optionality for some customers, like your machine breaks or maybe life change or whatever, like they can retire or whatever, just hand over the keys if that's something they want. So, like, monitoring those kind of things, like what's the sentiment, what's the health, how are the customers looking at? So that's a lot of my focus as well. And then just like thinking about partnerships, like how can we make Bitcoin mining more accessible to more people, right? Whether that is a retail customer, whether it's an institution, a public company, or a nation state or a utility that's just thinking about Bitcoin for the first time or mining and how they use more assets that they've already developed. So really just having conversations with all those players and thinking about how we can serve them.
Quick one.
Yeah.
Do you guys also offer mining management services, or?
Yeah, great question. So we do. So that can look like a few different things. So our managed services business is something we've stood up in the last year, really formalized and stood up in the last year. Really focused on, we have a lot of larger customers where a hosted solution probably won't make sense for them for, call it, epochs or decades, right? So really helping them transition, maybe a hosting solution is right for them right now, but helping them think, with a long view of like, hey, what do I need to have a long-term mining operation? And helping them transition from a hosted solution into maybe they own the infrastructure themselves. Maybe Compass can operate it for them. Maybe we could help them to develop a site, something like that. We also have customers that are interested in like basically building, I'll call it like a asset people light mining business where they basically just want to outsource all the thinking, right? And they just like they view access to Bitcoin or access to mining as a way to like augment their other business profiles, or maybe it's tax benefits, right? So this is short-lived assets that typically have tax benefits on accelerated depreciation and things like that. So they're viewing that as a way to drive down their tax liability, but they don't want to handle any of the like, don't ask me if I need to repair a unit or something like that, right? Just like do it all for me. Send me the Bitcoin to my this wallet address and tell me how I'm doing on a monthly basis, right? So we do all that.
No additional questions. Thank you, CJ.
Awesome.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.